If you are a creative who is struggling to find a focus, then this is for you. I'm going to break down 3 major problems that a lack of focus will create in our lives, both personally, but also, businesses we're building, churches we're building, etc. Focus is so important. And then I'm going to share actually 3 solutions that I found that work really well for me to get me out of a state of mind where sometimes I'm distracted or discouraged or just a little bit apathetic for whatever reason. If that's where you are, or maybe sometimes you have the ability, the capacity to get into that space, then this is really for you. So let's dive into it. So let's just talk. I'm going to bring some scripture actually in a moment and talk about what the Bible says about focus using a slightly different word. But I think it's kind of common sense, isn't it, that focus is pretty helpful. There's moments where you're on it. You're feeling fresh and you sit down and it's like, bam, you can just get into the zone, that creative zone where you work on a design or you're working on a piece of, an idea or a concept. And it's like, bam, just hours will go by when you're in that sweet spot of what, is often referred to as deep work. There's a great book called Deep Work, which talks about the need for focus. And there's certain creative problems and there's certain things in life that will only shift with the right amount of focus. And so when we find ourselves as creatives, sort of coming out of that state, we can't stay in that state forever, obviously, and the day is not going to be 8 hours of deep work focus, but you can get a few hours in of deep work and then go and do something fun or go and do some admin or whatever else you got to do. But when we find that we're not getting that deep work, we're not getting that deep focus, we're not just unproductive, we also feel unfulfilled. It's like it's frustrating, It's like, I'm not doing what is on the inside of me to do. And so I want to help you in this podcast episode to maximize your ability to get into that deep state of focus, a deep state of mind to actually be incredibly effective and also a great steward of what you're doing. So let's just take a look right now and just look at a scripture, which I think is really cool. And I always forget where it is, but you'll probably know where it is, so you can Google it. It talks about how we inherit the promises of God through faith and patience. So faith comes by hearing, a word from God. It's confidence, belief in what God is saying to us. It often comes with a vision because it's a picture of the future, maybe because God often speaks in pictures as well, particularly if that's the way that you're wired. And so we have this idea, we have this dream, we have this picture of the future that we can see. And of course, as a creative person, I've got these ideas all the time. I've got fresh things that God is speaking to me about, inspiration. And the danger of that gift is that we just sort of flip between many, many different concepts, many, many different ideas. And we never stay long enough in one place to dig a hole or to create something that goes deeper than just, a few months or a few weeks. And so the Bible actually says that we need not just faith, not just a vision of a future that God is speaking to us. We also need patience. We also need the ability to focus and keep showing up day after day, time after time, so that what we're doing is effective and it has the impact that we want it to have. So focus is a really important concept, and it's a biblical concept that we need to apply in our lives. So let's dial in, and maybe this will describe how you feel a little bit right now. The first thing is that a lack of focus, it creates inconsistency and irrelevance. Okay, so when we're not focusing, we end up being inconsistent. And because we're inconsistent, nobody knows what we're doing. And of course, the goal is not necessarily to be known, but at the same time, for your work to succeed, it probably will require certain relationships, whether that's a relationship with an investor, whether that's a relationship with a customer, etc. That there are people are always involved in our work because everything's about people, and so work, even on a commercial sense, even if we just take purpose and calling and God out of it, just on a purely financial sense, if you're selling something, you need to sell it to someone. And so people are always involved in what we're doing. And so when we're not consistent with our focus, we end up becoming irrelevant and people don't really know what we're up to. One of the greatest keys I can give you if you're running a creative business is simply try and be present. Be present with your customers, be present with people, get into people's minds. Sometimes the content we're posting is not the most exciting, but at least they know we exist. At least they know that you provide this offer, you provide this service. And, for a while I was kind of uncomfortable talking about what I did or just sharing about it. And I was just sort of reluctant. And so I was going through life with so many opportunities where I was not sort of actively sharing and making people aware. And the amount of work that has come since realizing if I just talk about what I do, people quite often have a need for what you're doing. And at the very least, you will have no chance of new work if you're not talking to anyone. And so when you're talking to people, sure, it's not everyone, but some people are going to gravitate towards what you're doing and go, wow, this could be a great fit. So a lack of focus leads to inconsistency and irrelevance. And so consistency is great because, it compounds. And when you keep showing up day after day after day, you're drilling like a deep hole, and you become really known. When you think about, do you want to be known to 1,000 people in a shallow way, or do you want to be known to 10 people in a really deep and meaningful way? I'd choose the 10 every single time. And if you look at business and, this idea of creating super fans and loyal customers, it's much better to focus on those deeper relationships. So the second thing is that a lack of focus will cost you energy. It costs you energy because one moment you're over here and you're doing something, you're creating something, and then the next moment you're over here. So, one moment you're on YouTube trying to create videos, and then the next moment you're on LinkedIn trying to create, blog post style content. And it's not that either one is necessarily better or worse, although there's arguments, of course, for that, which I'm not going to go into now. But it's just simply that if you were to dial in on one, you would have a much better return from trying to be everything, be everywhere. And so there's an energy cost for you because you're missing out on momentum. And so the smartest way to work is in the focused way, where you keep showing up and you keep investing and you keep being present, etc. So every time we get the new idea and we think, wow, I'm going to do a book, or I'm going to do this, or what about this? Often we're kind of self-sabotaging as well. That's the interesting thing. We are, we're afraid sometimes of success, and so we start another thing because we don't want to do the work, because focus does require work and to keep showing up consistently. And, when you start something, people applaud you, but when you're there 3 months, 6 months, a year in, and it doesn't look like much has happened, no one really cares. So, I've experienced that. And so the third thing is that a lack of focus is deeply discouraging. When you don't feel like you're going anywhere, and you've been putting all this time in, all this energy in, and it's like, what's happening? Like, what was the point of all of this work? What was the point of that course that I created? What was the point of all of that outreach that I did? What was the point of building this email list? What was the point of all these things? Because it doesn't feel like it's done everything and done anything. And I think this for me is the most dangerous aspect of losing your focus is it takes you into a kind of mental state where you just feel discouraged. And whenever you get into that space, you kind of lose your spark, you lose your creative genius for a moment, and you lose the ideas and you lose the freshness that made you so interesting and unique to begin with. And so a lack of focus has all sorts of problems that it creates for us. I'm going to share the 3 solutions that I think could be helpful to you and how we get our focus back and how we can fix this. But first, just want to encourage you, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. My name's Sat, aka the Digital Rabbi, and I talk about all things for Christian creatives around rest and making money and creativity. And of course, if you're listening on audio on podcast, please hit subscribe as well. Share with a friend who might find this helpful. So let's dive into the solutions. The first one is to stop looking at what you can't do. See, interestingly enough, a lack of focus is often just a focus on the wrong things. So we're focusing on the wrong things, and those things cause us to not focus on the things that matter. Right? So worry, if you think about it, is a type of focus. You are focusing on maybe a negative something scenario that could happen in the future. Or maybe regret is another example of a focus. We're focusing on something that happened. Maybe someone rejected you. Maybe you increased your rate and they said no, and you're like, oh, why did I do that? And it was awkward. And just conversations. Maybe you lost a client, or maybe you didn't do the work as well as you would have liked to, and you kind of regret that. Ruminating on those things, is a type of focus. And so, we need to stop looking at the things that we can't do and stop looking at the things that are outside of our control, and instead look to the things that you can do. Now, Jesus says this really well in Matthew chapter 6. He says, don't be anxious about tomorrow. It's like, well, thanks, as if it was as easy as that. But apparently it is. Or apparently it's as simple as that, at least. Don't worry about tomorrow, because you're not in control of tomorrow. You don't know what's coming tomorrow. You don't even know what opportunities will come tomorrow. So the more you worry about tomorrow, and we can extrapolate this and say, don't worry about yesterday. There's things that happened yesterday that are outside your control. But he says, but think about today. Today's got enough trouble, is what he says. So tomorrow's got its own special type of trouble, and today's got a type of trouble. And the thing is, if you don't focus on today, there's always another tomorrow. And so you keep focusing on tomorrow, and then there's another tomorrow. And so you never end up being effective in today because you're thinking about things that you can't do. So my question for us today is, what do you need? What can you think about? What is within your control right now? Now, we have to be patient when we're building a business. I did a podcast episode in January. It was actually my last episode. I'm now in April filming my next episode, which I'm going to talk about because I know what you're thinking. Hey, where's the consistency? But in January, I was talking about this concept of building the back end. And I was saying, so often we want to build all the front things, the things that look good, the things that look exciting. But often it's the things that are behind the scenes that are most important. We need to get our accounting in order. We need to build our mailing lists, building free lead magnets and things like that are not like posting every day. And so I actually took some time out from the podcast since that episode over the last few months to focus in my own business of building some of the behind the scenes things that I know are actually important. And so I think sometimes we're looking to, particularly when we're comparing, right? We're comparing to other people, we're seeing what they're doing. We're thinking, well, I would like to be where they are, but the thing is that they may be a few years ahead of you in what they're doing. And the more you're thinking about, I can't wait to do this really cool photo shoot, and I want the brand to look like this. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome, but you just might not be there yet. You might need to just get some clients. You might just need to start an Instagram account. You might just need to, there's things you're supposed to do today, and there's things you're supposed to do now. And don't worry about the other things, because that worry is going to cost you your focus. So Jesus actually says, worry about today. So there's a good sort of worry, right? It's good to be concerned about things. It's good to be responsible. Think of worry for today as being responsible. But when we're worrying about tomorrow, we tend to abandon our responsibility for today. And that, of course, has a sort of cycling effect where we don't feel great about it either. So the second thing is to start in imperfection. Start in imperfection. Don't wait for everything to be perfect until you start. And do you ever feel sometimes overwhelmed? Like there's just so many little things you got to do. You got to call someone, you got to send an email, you got to respond to a letter you've received, you need to pay a bill. And often these are the behind the scenes things, aren't they, that are important but not super exciting. And sometimes admin is like a creative's Achilles heel. And so sometimes those administrative tasks, they creep up on you, and the feeling psychologically is that you feel overwhelmed. And you kind of just look at your to-dos and you don't know where to start. And so what do? We kind of just keep, I should probably do that. And then, I should probably do that. And then I should probably do that. And that sense of overwhelm actually causes inaction. We don't really end up doing anything. We kind of mope around between half-done tasks because we're feeling overwhelmed, and that sense of imperfection. There's so much to do, stops us from actually getting on with it. Instead of thinking what's the right thing to do, because sometimes we're thinking, I want to do everything perfectly in the right order, and I want to be super effective. And so we spend so much time overanalyzing that we just don't get started. And so if we can just get started and start getting busy, and maybe the task you choose is not the most important task, but you know what? At least you got something done. And that sense of overwhelm is going to decrease, and you're going to get a momentum there with your tasks as your focus actually is going to work for you. So just start on something and choose one one thing to focus on. You're going to find that really helpful. And the third thing is commit to a long-term strategy. Commit to a long-term strategy. This is the best way to temper that creative spark in the inside of you that always wants to do something, fresh and new. And as I've said before, this is what often leads to our downfall because we don't stick at things long enough to see the fruit of what we're actually doing. And so we do need to mix in a long-term strategy with that creative spark. I think, for me, I like to leave some space in the day to go off on a tangent, and every now and then, and I try not to do it all the time, but I want there to be a little bit of a sense of a flow in my life. But I also make sure I create space to really sit down and, where I'm not necessarily doing any bitty stuff. And I really create space to ask myself, what is my strategy? What is my long-term strategy? So this will stop us from changing focus quickly because we're now going to actually hold ourselves accountable to something we're saying, a decision that we're making. And so we can do that if we create enough space, like a whole day or a whole week, to really lock in, okay, what is my focus here? How am I building this business? What's my funnel of how I get people from not knowing me to maybe having an awareness of me to, maybe getting a lead magnet and then maybe buying a service or something that I offer? What does that look like? And oftentimes creators have not done that work. We don't have a long-term strategy. Our strategy is just go with the flow and we'll do this over here, we'll do this over here. And that's why we don't have that focus because we've never really thought in the big picture. So I would encourage you, make sure you take some time out to do that and to really design what your business should look like, design what your life should look like, design what your church should look like and assess. And I've been doing it this week, just thinking, what are the things that really grow people? What are the things that really move the mission forward? And identifying those things so that I can now lock in with this new season for a focus and go, this is what I'm going to focus on. So if we don't have a clearly agreed, if we don't have clarity about that strategy, we're going to find it really hard to focus on it because we've got nothing to come back to. And so that plan, that strategic plan will actually keep us going and give us momentum. It's like going to the gym. You don't want to go to the gym having no idea what you're doing. You want to have a bit of a plan so that when you get there, you don't actually go, you know what, I can't really be bothered to lift that weight or to work that muscle. Why? Because human nature, we're not inclined to do the things that are hard. So we have to force ourselves, otherwise we're going to end up strengthening some muscles, but ignoring others. And so really important to have a plan and make sure you know what you're doing. So I hope you found that helpful. And maybe just some final thoughts just here, just as we close today's episode. This really is about psychology. And, there's a spiritual element to it as well. But when you are kind of out of sorts in yourself and you're not feeling that spark and you're feeling a bit discouraged, etc., we tend to get a bit fearful and we tend to make bad decisions. So we tend to not do the things we're supposed to do. We tend to miss opportunities. We tend to say the wrong thing. We get agitated. And so this sort of state of mind of coming back to rest is so important, that everything we're doing is from a place of peace, right? Like we know that there is a vision. We do have faith, and faith is resting in the promise of God. We know that there's work to do, and the work is good. Right? It's really interesting that Adam and Eve were placed in a garden that was perfect, but it was also unfinished. So if in that sort of paradise, there was still work to do, there's still work for us to do today. And that work is going to be hard work. We're working hard and, we're doing the things, but it's got to come from a place of peace and rest, because if you're agitated and rushing around, and so one of the first things we need to do if you're in that state of mind is actually just to stop. Just to stop and just have a look at your relationship with God and spend some time, read the Bible, pray, put on some worship music, and just slow down for a moment. Stop yourself from just chasing, being busy, and instead just pause and allow your spirit just to still, allow your mind to still. And it's from that place that we'll be able to come back in with focus. And so I just say that to say, I think sometimes we're quite robotic with the way that we treat ourselves. We're like, I should be fine. I should be able to keep going. But sometimes I've learned just to pay attention to how I'm feeling, pay attention to emotions. If it's been a emotionally difficult week, I will give myself space in my work that I just know I'm maybe not going to be as productive or not be as on it. And by leaning into that ebb and flow throughout the week, what happens is the next week I'm actually more productive. And so overall, my focus works for me rather than trying to force something that isn't there. So if you're feeling like all over the place right now and distracted and discouraged, let me just encourage you, maybe take the day off. Maybe take some time. Don't try and force something. Have a great night's sleep, have a great meal, hang out with some friends, or do something that recharges your batteries, and then come back in fresh, and you're going to be effective and do some great stuff. So hey, thanks for watching, listening today. Don't forget, hit subscribe on YouTube, listen on all of the standard podcast platforms. I've been Sats, aka the Digital Rabbi. I hope you found this helpful, and please share with a friend as well. See you guys.